Awake living into uncharted territory together, accelerating your wellness path, plus your interconnectivity at the same time.
It's not your grandma's or your Veda, but it kind of is.
It's the Yoga Healer Real Life Show with Kate Stillman.
Hello, it's Kate Stillman, and welcome back to the Yoga Healer Show. Today's a Dharma and Dollars episode, and on today's show, Pete Mockaitis, who I met at Podcast Movement, and I really liked him. He's got this super fun personality. He's super relaxed and knows a lot. He works a lot with CEOs on time management and strategy and helping them organize their teams and organization, and does a lot with critical thinking and collaborative training and stuff that I'm more and more interested in all the time. So today's episode is how to be awesome with your time. We're going to talk about thinking time. We're going to talk about scheduling, meetings, priorities. You can find more about Pete at howtobeawesomeatyourjob.com. That's the name of his podcast as well, How to Be Awesome at Your Job. On with the show. All right, I'm here with Pete Mockaitis, awesomeatyourjob.com. Welcome, Pete.
Thanks, Kate. It's great to be here.
Yeah, so you do a lot of coaching with lots of different types of clients in terms of helping people be more awesome at their job. I feel like I could be way more awesome at my job with infinite time. I think that's really the struggle for people now, right? Is there's so much possibility. We can make so much happen in so much shorter of a period of time than ever before.
Oh, certainly. And what's really fascinating about that, I think, is that there's more and more opportunity to cram stuff in so that you can make use of every spare second. I'm waiting for a bus or a train. And I can respond to some emails right now here on my phone. And so with that, it gets to be, all the more crammed tight. And that's what I've observed, and that's why I wanted you on my show. Thank you so much for your outstanding appearance with regard to the energy piece of it. So I think if you cram every minute full of productive activity, you end up at the other side of that day just exhausted.
Yeah, that's true. Interestingly enough, this morning I was like, I could start work or I could go meditate. And I was like, I should go meditate. I don't have a strict practice with meditation. I do it frequently, but that part of if I feel too busy, then I meditate, right? I'd do the opposite. It's like that because I'm I'm not going to do the right things probably, and I'll generate a bunch of subpar work. So let's talk a little bit about, go ahead.
If I might just real quick, I think that is really, if I could just toot your own horn, I think that's a fantastic mark of some maturity there, and I'm reminded of, if you're familiar with David Allen of Getting Things Done, he was on our show, episode 15, which was a real highlight for me. Is oh my gosh, an idol of mine.
Oh, that's huge. Good for you.
Oh, thank you. And he brought up a great point. He said a real mark of maturity when it comes to these practices is that when life starts getting out of control, if you recognize, I need to spin into doing some of these getting things done practices of, collecting and processing and such, rather than out of control, I don't have time for any of that, to be even more of a crazy person, then that's a good mark of maturity. And there you are. You say, hey, when life is getting too busy, you realize what is even more necessary is meditation. And I'm reminded of, I believe it was, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who said, I have so much to do today, I'd better spend another hour on my knees. Counterintuitive and yet wise.
Yeah, so let's talk about that, because one of the things that I'm realizing, and it's meditation's really different than thinking time. There's actually a good book on, I think it's called Thinking Time, or The Thinking Life. It's called The Thinking Life. And the guy, the guy who authored it, whose name escapes me, he makes an argument that meditation doesn't count for thinking time, and thinking time doesn't count for meditation. And I remember when I was reading this, I was like, oh gosh, something else that really needs to be done a lot, in terms of quantity of, maybe not, just another thing that really needs to be done daily, more or less. And the sense of if meditation is just not really entertaining thoughts, right? Then thinking time
Mm-hmm.
is entertaining really quite often specific thoughts or thoughts within a category towards a strategy for me. So I'm curious about
Absolutely.
this. Like, how does this work with you coaching CEOs and stuff like that? Like, how do they do this? Schedule it
Well,
in.
it's interesting, and you're right. I think when it comes to leaders and sort of folks with a whole lot of demands on their time, that's kind of one of the top things they want is more time to just think and be strategic. And so a lot of times it's just a matter of scheduling it and sort of alerting their assistants. It's like, no, this is my thinking time, and it is kind of scheduled the same way it is with any other person. And just because there's nobody in the office doesn't mean I'm available to be reached. And sometimes they'll have to disappear, into an undisclosed location, for that thinking time. But ultimately, it's just so valuable. So, are you familiar with the 80-20 principle?
Yeah.
Well, I think that's just so huge. And so for listeners who aren't familiar, the premise there is that in many areas of life, work, business, economics, productivity, 80% of the results or impact or outcomes comes from a minority or 20% of the inputs. And the numbers are approximate. I mean, it's kind of wild, actually, how you might see something pretty close to that ratio in all sorts of things. It was originally discovered when it came to land ownership in Italy. Fun fact. But they noticed that that's the case with many things. And so when it comes to our own productivity and taking care of business, taking an hour out for thought, can seem like, oh my gosh, I got too much to do. There's no way I could possibly do this. But in practice, if that hour of thought enables you to shift 1 hour or multiple hours, away from the minority of result producing stuff, like your 80% of time that produces only 20% of the results. If you can shift just a little bit of that over into your awesomeness time, then that makes a huge difference. So effectively, it seems like some hours are like 16 times more productive than others, is what this ratio is implying there. So if you could spend 1 hour thinking hard to shift 1 more hour away from, normal, okay, whatever stuff to, whoa, high impact stuff, that is massive. And you're so much better off having spent 2 hours doing that than 2 hours on whatever crazy thing is right in front of your face here and now, because it's the latest and loudest.
Yeah. And this is huge. So one of the things that I've noticed is if I look at how my schedule has changed quarter by quarter, there's certain times when I have a lot of meetings, and if I don't have enough thinking time to prepare and delegate and have other people also think and prepare and potentially, take actions, not necessarily delegate, but actually do that task before, then the meeting itself is like so much less productive. Like you really get into that, like, wow, we're using a lot of human time right now. Like a lot of people, like a lot of potentiality when you do that 80-20 and you have you have 4 people in the room, or you have 6 people in the room, or you have 8 people in the room. It adds up really fast. And we can get into this low common denominator by not having prepared, right? Or not having like really figured out like when do we need to be together, when do we need to be apart. So how do you help people with that?
Well, sure thing. And I think meetings in particular, to hit on that, you've really discovered a massive time suck in the world of professional living, and even for entrepreneurs, I think. And so I think it's just so important that, whatever your station in life, as you're listening to this, to go ahead and realize you have some power to push back on unnecessary meetings. Like if you can't see a real clear connection between why you're invited and what you're going to contribute there, I think it's very appropriate to ask the question, so what did you envision my role to be in this meeting? Or what were you hoping would be the point of view that I was going to add? And sometimes it's fascinating. Sometimes people get invited to meetings just because they don't want to be rude. Like, well, I mean, Kate, she might have a point of view here, and I don't want to offend her by excluding her from this exchange. So I guess we'll invite her. So in corporate life, I'd say that's one of my top tips is to just diplomatically, professionally push back in terms of saying, I'm not quite sure that this is going to be effective toward the end that we're achieving. So what did you have in mind? Just like, hey, I'm not being like, forget you, dude, you're wasting my life and I can't stand it. But just to say, okay, we're just going to have a friendly, diplomatic, candid chat about if this is really necessary to go toward. So just had to get that out there when it comes to the meetings. But what was the other part of the question? Excuse me.
Well, I guess because there's a certain number of reasons to have meetings, especially I have a totally virtual team. So for me, there's a connection, right? Like there's another caring human being. It's not just task, because we have a task heavy type of organization anyways, even though like our value and philosophy is a lot on connectivity. So for us, part of the reason we do meetings is for connectivity and for like sort of values alignment so that there's a level of efficiency that can occur. Right. Because of a deeper values alignment. So then, just based on that, there's less of being off brand, if you will, for like any team member and any sort of client interaction or even marketing potential client interaction, et cetera. So to me, there's a value to meet just for that, because some of that just comes through much more in in-person interactions, whether it's in a Zoom meeting or whatnot. So my question is, aside from the desire to connect and the efficiencies of connection, how can I look at all the meetings that I'm in and restructure how I'm preparing for them? Because I'm finding I'm just showing up, and therefore I'm less, and because I'm the leader often, right? It's like I haven't done the thinking time ahead of time, and I haven't delegated the tasks that need necessarily to be done. So how do I change? Like I said, this is my therapy time, Pete.
Okay, we could do it. Sure.
How do I
lie down?
No, I've been getting 9 hours of sleep a night. Nice. Oh my gosh. Yeah. It's cold where we are.
Lighter and earlier.
You are?
Well, I am.
How's it working?
I listen. It works well. Although if I do it too light or too early, I wake up hungry in the middle of the night. So I'm sort of fine tuning it. So it's just right. But no, it does make a difference. And I'm using this device, the S Plus by ResMed, which kind of monitors your breathing patterns and it kind of gives you a little report on your sleep. And it is, I think, I don't have enough data points to conclusively, say this is what's up, but I think it's real. And so that's one man's experience. And you're like, Pete, I know it's real. I've done it with thousands of people. So
I'm curious too. So, 4 out of 5 hunger cravings are thirst, which is weird.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So in the middle of the night, I would just drink a glass of water.
Okay.
And then you'll have to wake up and pee in the morning. You might sort of urgently need to pee because you're.
I hear you. But, well, I've got the water in one spot and then the coffee in the next, and so. I'm locked and loaded. I am all yours, Kate. But to your point about the meetings here, you say, all right, so how do you restructure things such that it is the most productive for the meetings? And in some ways, I'm thinking that it's really cool just to get super clear on your purpose there. And I loved it how you said, hey, sometimes the purpose is not task oriented. That's totally valid, in terms of it's about connection. It's about values alignment. And I would say it would be great if you could even just get real with that in terms of, okay, hey, this meeting, we're actually not going to accomplish any tasks because we're not prepared to handle it. But what we are going to do is we're going to maximize connection. We're going to maximize values alignment. And you might think about, one of my favorite books is as The One Thing by Gary Kelly and Jay Papasan. Yeah. And Jay was on the show too. Awesome guy. And so the question is, what is the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else becomes either unnecessary or much easier. And you can use that for any dimension, like for my health, for my meetings, for my business. And so you can start thinking, it's probably this. And so that's kind of what I'm thinking is sometimes when it comes to meetings, I think we bite off more than we can realistically chew in terms of, much like our own to-do lists. It's like we would love for all of these things to happen in the meeting, but, realistically, it's probably not going to. So I think it's just great to get really clear on what is your purpose. And if it is connection, think, well, what is the thing we can do that would make us most connected? Maybe it's a matter of sharing highs and lows or just connection time in terms of a check-in, like, hey, what was going on this week? How did that go? And I've been in some environments where in an hour-long meeting, we spent half of it just on what they call check-in. And I go, yeah, so what's going on? It was funny for me because it was in a nonprofit environment. It was a little more, I guess, touchy-feely than I expected. Like, whoa, people really up and hang up. Like, my marriage isn't. I'm kind of worried. I don't know if we're going to make it. Like, oh, okay. So, I mean, but sure enough, that team felt quite connected. And when they had farewells, when someone moved on to the organization, it was powerful, in terms of the connection they had. Mm-hmm. Or when it comes to values alignment, you might say, well, what's the one thing that could maximally, produce values alignment in this conversation? And maybe that's in terms of someone saying, hey, look at this crazy inspiring thing. That is exactly who we are and what we're trying to do. Or, hey, get a load of how I was tempted to send this one customer, email reply, and then thought better of it and said this other one. And so, I'd love your feedback on how, we could make even more values alignment. So I think it's cool. It's like, if you get clear on this is the primary purpose of this meeting, you can start prioritizing accordingly. And then when it comes to the tasks, or the sort of output type stuff, I think it's just really great to likewise get super clear on what would we call success for this meeting. Is it that we decide on this? Like, we will, by the end of this meeting, we will have determined the launch plan and dates for which products go out when. Okay, that is success. The output looks like we have a series of dates that we all say, yes, we like that. And so then you're clear, like, okay, that is what success means for this meeting. And thusly, what must I have done in advance in order to arrive at that? And so then your thinking time, I think sometimes it's a matter of just establishing, well, hey, it must not conflict with this. You maybe establish your parameters. Or other times your thinking time, becomes doing time, in that it's like, oh, well, I guess I got to quickly find out my options. I got to find out the availability. I got to cross-reference, what else is already on the calendar. And so I think it can become rather natural then, in terms of, rather than following, Pete's, 9-point framework and fancy acronym, it could just be a matter of getting real clear. It's like, all right, what does success mean for this meeting? In terms of, we have, mission accomplished, and then what has to be in play in advance of this meeting for that to realistically potentially happen. And then I think things can become pretty clear. And what's striking is that sometimes you'll see, oh, wow, this meeting is maybe only half an hour of discussion and decision, and really like a dozen hours of background research.
Yeah.
To get there. And sometimes the ratio can be that dramatic.
Yeah, I really get that. I think I get that more and more, of just how, too, I think in what you're saying, what I'm realizing is that we should have really very few weekly meetings where they're like, what's on our week to week meeting rhythm as a team, is like making those like the absolute bare minimum, and then having more of these project centric meetings with very specific outcomes before anyone says yes, where whoever's calling the meeting is saying, like, this is exactly what we're going to be doing. This is why you're invited. This is what you're expected to do before the meeting. And we're not doing that, which sounds
Certainly
pathological at this point. We're going to take a quick break here, and I just want to mention why I do these Dharma and Dollars episodes. As the person in the seat of the helm at yogahealer.com, like, I took on this mantle of yoga healer in 2001. In my life, my yoga, my world has obviously evolved and changed a lot in the last, how many? Oh boy, 16 years. What I found, and what I continue to find, is that the real life conversations, what's working for other people, about what challenges other people have, to me, those are the ones that are the most entertaining to have. To me, those are the ones that I can get an action step, and I can apply, and I can test, and I can see, does that work for me? And I hope that's what you do as a listener to the Dharma Dollars show. I help a lot wellness pros take the next step in their careers and break through their glass ceilings, etc. This show helps us be on the same page. It gives us a lot of shared context as we continue this episode, how to up-level your team with your values. As you're listening, you might think, I don't have a team, but you do have a team. If you live with other people, think of that as your team. If you work with other people, think of them as your team, and start to realize, like, how do you get on the same page with values? What happens when you do? That's what's next. I want to tell you all about the connectivity kit. So many of us have been on a personal evolution journey. We've had a lot of growth. We've had a lot of breakthroughs. And we know that our relationships determine much of our day-to-day reality. Our day-to-day relationships determine our future growth. We get that to plan and strategize on our future growth, we need to evolve our connectivity skills. And we want to share with our peeps. We want to inspire. We want to motivate. We most importantly want to build evolutionary relationships. So in that vein, I have developed the connectivity kit. It's less than $100. Basically, you can sign up and we help you evolve your relationships. We're all tired of the hyperconsumption that's taken over holiday traditions. And what we really deep down want to do is have a better time with people. This is a little online e-course that helps you and 3 of your peeps. That's right. You get to invite 3 of your peeps in it. There's lots of answers to any questions that you may have about what the connectivity kit is. All of that is at yogahealer.com/connectivity. You get to get it for you, but you get to give it to 3 people. And the whole idea is you get to do it together. The whole idea is the outcomes of it are that you'll connect deeply with your core peeps, with your community. You'll have sparkier, more compelling conversations. There's a whole productivity section for anyone who wants to tap into what easeful productivity looks like. You'll be able to skillfully design your space and your time better. And the whole idea here is that you will up-level 3 of your key relationships going into the new year. We recommend 3 core relationships for you to actively evolve through using the connectivity kit. 1 is a friendship. So right now, just think of who comes to mind. Who would you want to evolve your relationship with? Number 2 is an evolutionary partnership, someone that you can foresee helping on your dharmic up level in the next year. And the 3rd is a mentor or a mentee relationship. And you'll get to gift. Of course, if you just want to give it to 3 friends or 3 family members, that is totally kosher. Once you sign up, you get in, you get access. There's 4 zones of training. One's the connectivity zone. The other is the sparkly conversation zone, the mentor zone, and the productivity zone. I had so much fun developing the videos, the tip sheets, the trainings, the tools to help you evolve your connections and your partnerships. Once you invest, you always have access. It never expires. In fact, if you invested last year, send an email to info@yogahealer and send them your receipt. We'll actually let you invite another 2 or 3 people in there because that's what we're all about. We're up-leveling connectivity and helping you have the tools and the support that you need to evolve your relationships. Go to yogahealer.com/connectivity. CONNECTIVITY. Happy holidays. Which sounds
Certainly
pathological at this point.
Pathological. Well, I mean, maybe sometimes I think we just get into habits. It's like, hey, you know what? We got the Tuesday morning meeting. That's what we do on Tuesday mornings. It's just the thing, and then sometimes it's like, well, if this is the meeting we have. Oh, shoot, I should have something to say. And sometimes I think it's totally fine to say, hey, guys, this is actually going to be really short. There's no, urgent items, but I just want to make sure we felt connected and aligned. So, hey, what's going on? Cool.
Yeah.
All right. 12-minute meeting accomplished. We're energized, connected, aligned, and liberated to do what we need to do.
Yeah.
And for the weekly stuff, I think it's interesting to think about like what is truly necessary for recurring items, and you might have a sort of a standing agenda like new stuff that happened that everyone should know about that I didn't think an email was good enough to send. That's a long section title, but but that could be one category of stuff for the weekly meeting. And the other stuff is, hey, real quick, maybe accountability style, and this might be one-on-one, it might be in small groups, in terms of what was the main thing that you wanted to accomplish this week? Did you accomplish it? Okay, cool. And then what is the primary thing you hope to accomplish next week? And so you'll make note of it. And so that can be a bit of a motivating boost on a recurring weekly basis, that accountability dose. But you're right. I think sometimes we find ourselves in a groove, a rhythm, a pathological habit. This is a meeting at this time, and we're going to do it, and I'm going to hope to think of something relevant to say during it, so I don't feel silly or like a loser who is leading a meeting in which there is not a whole lot of purpose. I mean, it is quite easy to fall into that.
Yeah. Well, and I think the other side of that too is where there's just this. It's like the meeting rhythm has its own trajectory that can just create more busy work because there wasn't enough thinking time ahead of time. Right.
Oh, certainly. Yes.
Right.
One of my, I don't know if I made this up or if I heard it somewhere, but I'm thinking, the easiest way to remove something from your to-do list is to decide not to do it. Like, it doesn't need to be done. Yeah. And I'd say what's interesting, especially when you're the boss, you're the leader, it's like folks might say, okay, well, Kate asked me to do this, therefore I'm going to do it. I don't see much of a point. Yeah, I don't know if this is really going to be super helpful. So, I mean, that could be one thing right there, is just empowering the team so everyone feels comfortable, doing that pushback and saying, hey, I don't perfectly see exactly, how this is going to help us achieve the goal. What were you thinking was the rationale for this? So the more that people feel empowered to do that, and I'm sure you're a kind, compassionate human being.
Well, but it's not that. I mean, it's not coming from that place with my team members. I mean, we have 1, 2, 3. We have 4 Filipinos on the team, and so there's a lot of just cultural bias.
I want to hear all about this. I work with some Filipinos myself who are fantastic. Make everything possible. So what are? Yeah. I don't know if this is more of a detour, but I want to know what you're observing.
Well, no, it's just different. I mean, especially like the American female CEO is a different kind of an organism, right? Because we've gone through a lot of empowerment, usually from an early age, and found our voice and overcome a lot of, whatever obstacles were left in terms of glass ceilings, right? We've already overcome a lot of those. So there hasn't been that much, I would say. And I'm 44. Anyone who's born probably, any of the boomers were probably like, we actually had to overcome a lot because we were still supposed to wear like high heels and nylons and, be a size 6 or whatever. Whereas like my generation, I don't feel like I had any of that. Like as long as I could figure out how to make a buck, there wasn't much to stop me, really, in terms of mindset or anything. Like it was all equal opportunity. I felt like for me in high school and in college, there were no gender. I didn't have gender bias, and I've worked for myself my entire adult life. So I haven't had a boss to tell me like or whatever. There hasn't been any sort of like gender bias in my own self promotion process. We'll say, right? But
your clients, you think they too? That's awesome.
95% of my audience is female, and clientele is female. So there's that.
And in the Philippines, you're saying it's a bit of a different.
Well, I'm just saying for my Filipinos, it's not even gender bias as much as just like boss employee or boss contractor.
Oh, I hear what you're saying.
Right,
yeah.
That there's just a lot of there's a culture that is not a challenger culture. Whereas the American
kind of
culture
polite
is like super challenger. So like my Americans and Canadians are like they'll be like, why Kate, huh? Whereas for like one of my Filipinos, it would not occur to them to say that. So we have to encourage them. Like one of our values is we communicate with candor and care, and they're high on the care side. I'm low on the care side. So I'm always trying to develop my care in my communication. It's not that my heart doesn't care. It's just I don't communicate with care naturally. I'm super challenging. But candor, never a problem for me. Never. Right. Gets me in trouble all the time. But for them, I'm like, can we just turn up the candor by about like 5,000%? Right.
Intriguing. Yeah. I wonder if you could maybe, I don't know if this is smart or not. We're just brainstorming out loud. I wonder if you could maybe put it to the test by occasion, like you encourage that, right? And then you occasionally say something off the wall, terrible idea.
Just to test them.
And then you see if they say anything. And then you chime in. It's like, now, what did you think of that idea? I thought it might be a terrible idea. And if you thought that, I want you to feel free to say that.
I can't wait for them all to hear this episode. This is going to be fun.
Soon they'll tell you all of your ideas are terrible. You're like, no, that was for real, guys. But maybe that's what you need, right? Yeah. A good debate to refine your thinking.
Well, and even just I'd love to like the idea of like setting it up as a game. Like gamify it a little bit. Like the next quarter, I'm going to give you 6 ideas. You got to tell me the 2 that are in there.
That's right.
That
it's
I
like 2
planted.
truths and a lie.
Yeah, totally. Oh my gosh. So let's go back to. I want to ask a question that's not really at my level, but a lot of my clients' level, which are they're wellness pros, they're yoga teachers, body workers, nurses, doctors. Holistic practitioners of every variety. And they're often making that transition the one that Michael Gerber talks about going from a technician to a business owner. Right. And so they're in that where, the phone rings, they take the appointment. They just, they're just basically in reactive mode where they're busy. They're doing a lot of things. They're successful enough to pay their bills, et cetera. There's not much leverage built into their business. So they're making that transition to working on their business as well as in their business. Right. And they often don't schedule meetings with themselves. They often don't do quarterly planning. They often don't have this sort of thinking strategy time. And they often, even if they have virtual assistants, they often don't have a structured meeting rhythm. So any advice in there for people making that? I know this is a big question, but any advice in there for people making this transition?
Well, and I think that, it's a bit different for everybody, but I mean, I resonate with that struggle. I've been there and I've seen that. And I think this is where some of that, 80-20 and the one thing questions really just come to light in a big way. And in terms of getting clear on where am I spending my time that is not effective. And I would say effective in a couple ways in terms of it doesn't seem to be, generating new clients for you. It doesn't seem to be a whole lot of fun. It's not sort of energizing, rejuvenating, exciting, engaging. And I think it's good to get really clear on if you can identify, what is the one thing that I could, systematize or outsource or, get rid of or in some way that would make everything else easier or unnecessary. Or if I look at a breakdown of the sheer hours I'm spending on working in and on the business, each week, where is there a whole lot of unnecessary stuff that I could handle? And I think it's just sort of like one thing at a time. And so I'm thinking about in my own, business history, I could think of times with podcast production. There was in the first few episodes, I was doing everything. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm going to go insane
and broke.
This is not sustainable. This is just, and so then it became real clear. It's like, as I look at the hours spent, it's like, well, what's taking a lot of time? It's the editing. It's like, it's kind of fun. It's like, playing with the cool software and listening to it. Like, what? We can eliminate that vocal pause. Let's do it. Like, let's change that sound a little. It is kind of fun and artistic. But then afterwards, it's like, whoa, it's been 3.5 hours. Like, I can't keep doing this. And so it became pretty clear that the one thing is figuring out, how that could be outsourced. And what's so fascinating is that I think there's often like one little bit of resistance is enough to just make you shut it all down in terms of, well, yeah, but I have to be able to determine what parts I want to keep and what parts I want to cut. I can't just outsource that. How are they going to know? They don't know my brain. And so that can like get you stuck for a while. Is like there's one bit of resistance, or there's one unresolved question when it comes to executing that, and you're like, well, I guess it can't be done, because I'm really busy to have a whole lot of stuff that's there. And I think like, no, this is the hard part that becomes oh so worth it if you figure it out. And so I think that's the question. Is sort of like, okay, well then what's the roadblock? What needs to be addressed strategically next to make this possible? And so that for me, that was the question. Is like, well, how can I have a system wherein I still, call me a control freak, get to choose what goes and what stays, but I have other people doing all the other editing of executing it. And it was tricky, but I think that if you can schedule, again, that thinking time, like how do I get to the bottom of this, then that's great. And I'd say as you get more awareness into your body and, as your people are probably into, you kind of notice like, oh, at what point of the day am I most creative? And for me, it's like right in the early morning before. And so if I'm going to have some like leap of insight, it's more likely going to happen then than any other time of day, as well as what part of the day am I just fiercely determined and like unstoppable, and it's about 10 a.m. Central. So here we are. Try and stop me, Kate. I dare you.
I'm not stopping you, Pete.
Thank you.
I'm not stopping you. Well, this is, yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So with that awareness, you could schedule particular times to go to town. It's like, I need an intuitive leap. All right, well, I'm going to schedule this creative time to think about this thing and try to get an intuitive leap versus I got to dig down and do some stuff I don't want to do, like sorting through dozens of potential audio engineers who might be up for the job. And just to end the story, here's what went down. We figured out that by getting the transcription done in advance of the audio editing, we were able to very quickly read it, because we read faster than we listen, and just highlight parts in red that should go. And thusly, we can communicate via Google Docs with the audio engineers, hey, parts in red, you got to go. And generally speaking, eliminate vocal pauses that are easily gettable, and et cetera. Follow these parameters. And so that way I was able to retain my control freak power, but save so much time associated with the editing. So there is a way. There may be some resistance, some unresolved questions, but don't let that stop you. Rather, realize, well, that's the next step, and that's the next thing to be solved. And once you solve it, it's like, wow, I have so many more hours because I don't have to answer those emails or do the bookkeeping or do the audio editing, like whatever system or outsourcing liberates that time. Ooh, it's so powerful once it's up and cruising.
I love it. And I love building the habit around that, the habit around recognizing the resistance, recognizing the inefficiency, then recognizing the resistance, scheduling in a time to tackle it head on, come up with a new system, and then implement it. Like, to me, that's because I think when we do that continually, or what I've found from doing that consistently, is that from one quarter to the next, my job description changes dramatically, and I'm infinitely happier in how I'm able to, invest my days.
Ooh, say that again. You're infinitely happier one quarter to the next because things have changed, or you're telling me more.
Well, yeah, because of that, right? Because of just noticing, like, I'm resistant to doing X, right? So I'm like, well, there must be an inefficiency, or it's something that either could be deleted or delegated, or maybe the whole thing just needs back up, go to the 30,000 foot view. What's trying to happen here next? What's what's possible, what's potentially possible, and then redesigning it, seeing what parts I'm involved in, if any, right? And then doing this with everything, so that then by the next quarter, it's like my job's different, and I'm doing exactly what I want to do.
And it feels beautiful, just when you see how life is. I'm with you. How life is enhanced one quarter to the next, and I would say it's that hard stuff that, in a way, makes you feel the most sort of proud. It was like, you know what? This was hard. This was tricky. I didn't quite know how we were going to figure it out, and I did. And so then, I feel like some sort of, I don't know, brilliant strategic mastermind, as I just sip a beverage and peruse the transcript and say, okay, I have approved these markings. Now continue. It feels awesome, and it's sort of like, hey, before, well, man, that was quite challenging, and now it's all kinds of liberated, and it creates just a beautiful virtuous cycle. It's like, well, now I feel like I have more free time to imagine cool new ideas and possibilities and means of improving things even more.
Yeah, cool. Have you has it changed to how you do your podcast or ask questions, or so that there's less editing in general? Like, have you gotten to, is there an efficiency happening where there's just simply less that gets cut?
Well, I think a little bit in that, well, yes. And I think that, well, you on the receiving side saw, I think, some of our briefing materials. So once you make that appointment, the guest receives sort of a detailed kind of 4-slider that reveals kind of the key things in terms of, given this audience, these are the sorts of things we like to hear, the things that we don't like to hear so much, and da-da-da-da. And so as a result, like, when I ask a question, in a way, there's 100 different ways you could approach a given question. But if I say, what I want you to answer the question with an eye toward sharpening the universal skills required for professionals to flourish at work. And here's what I mean by that, in 50 bullets of detail, segmented on, not that I, okay, the control freak thing again, but I mean, not that I'm, going to, like, I've never, like, said, no guest, try again. I mean, we still keep it, light and fun and chill. But I think that has been a helpful means in terms of identifying, boy, what is the stuff I keep having to edit out? Oh, it's when the folks just sort of go in that direction, which is, sort of interesting, but it's not useful.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the distinction that I try to make clear in terms of this is what we're after. And if it's interesting, kind of like in a freakonomics, sense of the word, like how do otters do this, or then, that it's cool, but it's not quite what we're up to over here at the How to Be Awesome at Your Job podcast.
Awesome at your job. Unless the otter is talking about being more efficient.
Yeah.
Meetings.
You can learn a lot. See, now, if you rephrase that, like, we can learn a lot about otters when it comes to doing efficient meetings. Like,
right.
Okay.
Now we're in.
Now that's gold. That'll work.
Oh, awesome, Pete. I'm glad we had a chance to talk. I want to talk to you again sometime about collaboration. We do a lot of collaborative type leadership here at Yoga Healer, and I'd love to find out what's happening more in collaborative leadership and practices in companies. So at some point,
thank you.
I'll hit you up.
Yeah, when the time is right, that'd be a lot of fun.
Awesome. Have a good one. Go be awesome, man. I'll go be awesome at my job, and
yes,
I assume you're always awesome at your job.
I'd say more days yes than no. We'll see.
Next Monday, why I make soup in the wintertime. Yep, that's what I'm going to talk about. We're going to have these really simple shows coming up. I'm going to do a series in December and January, and these really simple shows that are just 10 minutes long, addressing one particular topic. The next show, soup.
Yoga Healer Real Life Show with Kate Stillman. Yoga Healer.